So looking at TS4 for my foundation placement planning and teaching well-structured lesson. So I use my formal observation sheet conducted by Kirsty as my start point for this standard. Within my lesson and from our discussions, looking at TS4, Kirsty said your lesson was very well planned, your progressions were appropriate and pacey. As discussed, you need to ensure you minimize teacher talk and maximize pupil activity. Some thought to transition would be beneficial in maintaining pace. So looking at an AFL, the main focus here was looking at whole class Q&A. So I had not allowed to use it in my next lesson, so I had to plan accordingly to ensure I didn't include my whole class Q&A to use as a different tool for pupil progress and monitoring pupil learning. So in my lesson plan, I planned effectively and in great detail. Just to zoom up a touch to see a different way of doing that. So my plan was to split the group into split into 7 groups of 3. And at each group of 3 at the start of the lesson they would have a sheet, because I was looking at basketball. I was looking at basketball, the rules and regulations of dribbling in basketball. So I split the group into in each group of 3 they had a handout at the start with a mind map, and in that they had a few different questions and they had to put down as much information at the end. And afterwards at the end I was planning on using it as a tool to see how my teaching and planning, what they could add to at the end of the lesson. So just looking here, looking at the impact, I used the green pen to notice the difference of the impact, and you can see here there's a lot more being added in green pen within the lesson. So the impact is apparent that planning had a positive impact on the students and learning, that they were able to add a lot more to the spider diagrams at the end of the lesson. This plan and delivery enabled my students to develop an understanding of the rules of how to dribble, therefore achieving my learning objectives. This will come from my detailed planning, allowed me to do all this. My mentor observed the lesson, identified I planned clearly, which you'll see in a second, and I ensured I limited group question. He also suggested there's a clear evidence of how people progressed using the spider diagram activity. So if we look here again, you can see a lot more has been added in green compared to at what they had at the start of the lesson, just the black pen. So we look deeper here at Luke and his group example. So I only asked them to put down one name. So we had 3 questions of what the rules of dribbling were, why we're using, how do we dribble using the technique. And there's very few points at the start of the lesson. However, at the end of the lesson, you can see there's a bit more generic, but they can see that they weren't going to dribble with 2 hands. They're only allowed to use one hand. I included all the rules which I planned to go over, so that all come from my plan to ensure I had detailed planning to allow my pupils to progress in this. So yeah, just looking at my mentor sheet after, which I said my mentor Jay suggested. He said a good detailed plan and structure allowed the lesson to flow, and you could clearly see student progress from start to finish using the worksheet at the start, and how my teaching impact the students with a different colour pen. So that's just looking at how planning effectively allowed me to deliver lessons where I'd engage the students and ensure that I maximise their learning. Looking at some literature here. Excuse me. Following my initial feedback, I recognised that I needed to apply different assessment for learning strategies other than group questioning to ensure my students, as Harris 2007 suggests, questioning, especially with lower order, may limit discussions and student learning. Jones and the Learning and Skills Development Agency suggested it's essential that teachers plan effectively to create opportunities for learners to obtain information students' progress and achievement towards their learning outcomes to ensure learning takes place. Therefore, with this in mind, it was essential. My planning allowed me to plan for the spidergrams and the questions which I put on there, which will allow me to cover my learning objectives. And through my teaching, it allowed me to ensure that students' learning was achieved and the learning objective was achieved. So just looking back at the plan here, I used different activities, and through that I would have stopped the group as a whole and gave them some teaching points, and did it for a few conditioned games to ensure my planning was effective to meet my learning objective and my teaching to maximise students' learning. So that's just a brief recap on TS4, my foundation placement, looking at planning and teaching well-structured lessons. As I said in my other videos, if you'd like to look over my evidence in more detail or zoom in more, which I'm not sure how it comes up in the video, then feel free. But thank you.